Professor. Oh,
That's the recording times.
good. With Professor Powell, Professor Chandran, who are also neurologists at the clinic as well. And as part of this project, my focus is on developing what's called digital speech biomarkers in Parkinson's disease, and I'll go on to talk a bit more about what that is, and also about how you may wish to get involved and help us with this as well. So with today's talk, I'll outline why do we care about speech, what's so important about it, especially in Parkinson's disease, some of the aims of our project, this NeuroCARE App thing, I'll talk more about that because that's really the main thing that we're using to conduct this study. And I'll describe a bit more about what's involved in the study assessment, how we'll use your information, and how you might contribute as well, and why I think you should contribute. So, first of all, why do we care about speech? Well, speech is one of those quite unique functions that we have that involves huge swathes of our brain and our nervous system. And it's implicated in lots of other domains of our neurological function as well. Now, in Parkinson's disease, the most obvious one is probably the motor function. Oftentimes we see patients speaking a bit more slowly. They might have a different quality to their voice. And although we might be able to describe these sort of changes, it's at the moment we don't really delve into detail how that change is occurring. Speech also involves cognition, so we need our brains to engage with memory, with coming up with the sentences we speak. We also use our brain to read what's in front of us and digest and comprehend language as well. So cognition is very important, and in Parkinson's disease, we know that many people suffer from memory issues who are living with Parkinson's disease, and up to about 80% of people living with Parkinson's disease eventually go on to develop some form of dementia. So cognition is quite an important aspect of this as well. But speech isn't just about the stuff that neurologists and doctors look at. It's also about much more than that. It's the main way for us to communicate as humans. So it carries information about our mood, our emotions, about our psychological well-being. And it's also very important in the social aspect of everyday life as well. We use speech to speak to other people, in dialogue with other people. We very rarely do monologue and just recite poetry and things like that. So speech is involved in such a dramatically significant portion of our lives that a lot of people thinks that speech and language is the one key thing that separates us from the apes. So this is Jane Goodall, who's a very prominent primatologist, and she also thinks that it's just the spoken language that makes us different from chimpanzees, who are our closest relatives. So it would be silly for us not to capitalize on this in terms of human diseases like Parkinson's disease and other neurological conditions as well. So I'll talk a bit about speech as a disease biomarker and where we are at the moment. So if you were to come to clinic at the moment and you're seen by a consultant or by a speech and language therapist, the way that we would assess your speech is quite qualitative. And by that, I mean, we would listen to it with our trained ear, and we would apply descriptions to it. We might say that it sounds a bit slurred, or we might say it's a little bit hoarse. But oftentimes, as I said, although it is trained ear, it requires experience, it's still quite a subjective thing. Although there's been many attempts to standardize it, so trying to get everyone to assess it in a similar way or assess it in a systematic way so that we can, share results between practitioners and between patients, there still hasn't been much standardization so that we can achieve that comparison between people. And finally, it is resource intensive, not just for the hospitals and for doctors, but also for patients as well. Oftentimes these speech assessments takes over hours or even multiple sessions. So patients have to come back to clinic multiple times in order to get proper assessments with a speech and language therapist, for example. And so there's room here for a more modern biomarker, something that we can capitalize on in 2024, something that is more quantifiable, quantitative, sorry. So by that I mean we can assign numbers to it so that we can analyze it in more sensitive detail. something that is more accessible, so that we don't need to bring patients back into clinic frequently, so we can reduce the burden of these assessments. Something that is scalable, so that we can do it more frequently and gather more information, so that we can have a closer and more in-depth information about the condition, and something that we can better standardize as well, so that hopefully we can use this information in a more sort of comparable way, so we can use it in clinical trials. We're looking at drug treatments, for example, or we can use it to compare how two patients are progressing in some other form of health research. So these are all really the goals for why we want to do a study like this. And the way that we think would enable us to make this change from what we're currently doing is with digital technology. So what we're hoping to do is to create what's called a digital biomarker with the technology we have available. So we're all using technology right now to be on Zoom and to listen to this talk, and we're using everyday easy to use digital tech devices that have become incredibly prevalent in our society, and they're able to record high quality and high frequency information as well. This is not to neglect the fact that it's still difficult for a lot of people to use this technology, so we need to be mindful that we need to create these tools, these services in a way that is centered to people living with Parkinson's disease and other neurological conditions. But what we want to do is we want to combine those technologies with state-of-the-art speech processing technologies, as well as machine learning methods, so that we can interrogate the speech that we record and create these computer models that can tell us more information about the speech from our participants and from our patients as well. So what will these speech biomarkers do? How would we be able to use them? So I've been thinking a lot around this area, and I think this can be split into three different areas. First of all, we can use speech as what's called a clinical outcome. So we can basically use the quality of speech and the language that's being produced as a marker of how the disease is progressing. So we can then use that in a clinical trial to monitor patients and also monitor patients as their disease progresses. We can use it as what's called a surrogate outcome, so we can use it in place of something else that is more difficult to measure. So in Parkinson's disease, a particularly obvious one would be the motor function. It's often not very easy to measure just how slowly one might be moving, or how difficult the motor impairment might be. And also cognition as well, because that is something that often takes cognitive tests to be done, which takes time. And finally, we can also use speech biomarkers as a predictive outcome, something that helps predict some other events in the disease. So in Parkinson's disease, that might be when someone might need a dose escalation in the medication to help control their symptoms, or it might be to predict someone's cognition, when they might need a bit more help with their memory, that sort of a thing. So these are all areas that we're hoping to investigate, and we're hoping to look at as well as part of this project. So I mentioned machine learning and AI and all these buzzwords that are floating around, and to facilitate that, we're working with a speech technology company that originally came out from university called SpeakUnique, and they have expertise in speech synthesis using these artificial intelligence technologies. And I just wanted to show you a video quickly of what kind of work they do. So they basically take speech from people who have had speech impairments, such as in motor neuron disease, multiple sclerosis, etc., and they record the speech, they repair it digitally using these AI technologies, and then they give them back to the patient so that they can use it in their own words. That doesn't make much sense when I say it, but I'll show you. What I'll be showing you is a video of the rugby league legend Rob Burrow, who was unfortunately diagnosed with motor neuron disease. And he became the first person to do CBeebies bedtime stories without the use of his own voice. So he was using the voice that was given to him by SpeakUnique. The sound should be working, but if not, just shout. I'll just play it here.
CBeebies bedtime stories are available on the BBC iPlayer app.
CBeebies Bedtime Story.
Hello, I'm Rob. I can't use my voice in the way that maybe you can, which is why I use this computer to talk for me. It's called an eye gaze. I use my eyes to gaze or look at the words and it speaks for me. It's like magic. I used to play rugby as my job, but something happened that made my world go upside down. It made me feel topsy-turvy, but I was brave and didn't give up. Just like the little girl in tonight's bedtime story. It's called Tilda Tries Again, and it's written and illustrated by Tom Percival.
I'll stop it there just before it goes on to the story, but I encourage you to go and watch it, because the first time I watched it, I teared up a bit as well. And I think it shows just that, these AI machine learning things, they're not just buzzwords anymore. We're using these technologies actively to change people's lives. And I'm very glad that we were able to work with SpeakUnique and with a lot of the speech scientist expertise behind this in order to basically reverse that process. So we're hoping to use the speech from people with different speech impairments, including in Parkinson's disease, in order to find more information about their illness so that we can improve the diagnosis and the monitoring as well. But I just thought I'd show you that, because I think that's a very powerful it's a powerful way of showing how this technology is being used now. So the aims of our project, it's slightly split into two phases. We have a phase 1, which is actively recruiting. We've been going on for about 1.5 years now, and we're actively seeking people to help us, where we're trying to collect as much speech data as possible to generate these computer models of speech in Parkinson's disease. And because we're using these AI technologies, we need lots and lots and lots of people to help us. And then we're looking into completing a phase 2, which we're awaiting approvals for, where we then subsequently collect some follow-up speech data from the same people in order to generate computer models that can tell us more about the disease progression. So that's what we're hoping to start that up in the next couple of weeks. We're just waiting for a few approvals, which, fingers crossed, are nearly complete. So the way that we're collecting all this speech data is through this thing called the NeuroCARE App, which I'll talk a bit more about. It's essentially a website or a web application that you can access, and we can access, can help you access, and it's developed by the clinic, by clinicians, by academics, by doctors, nurses, as well as speech scientists, and we've had a lot of help from the business community, from IT community, but very crucially as well from patients and relatives as well, because we've been collecting feedback and input from our patient groups regarding what is it that makes a digital tool useful and user-friendly to them. And this is an app that we're using in order to capture digital signals of neurological disease. So it includes Parkinson's disease, but it also includes multiple sclerosis, motor neuron disease, other forms of dementia as well. And what's included in this app is broadly split into 4 sections. So we've got the all-important speech recordings. We've got 5 recording tasks that we'll use to collect speech recordings. And it gets you to read some sentences out or tell us about how your week has been, that sort of thing. Sorry, the formatting's a bit funny, so the text has gone out of the box slightly. We've also got some health questionnaires, so we'll ask you things about your mood, about your sleep, about how you've found things have been at home, and these are all sort of validated health questionnaires that are used in research, and that will help align what we know from the speech with the results from these questionnaires. We've also got some memory games as well, because we're using these digital apps and technologies, and so it would make sense to digitize some of the functional assessments that we commonly do in the clinic as well. So we've got this sort of what's called a strip test, which is a little sort of color word game where you try and tell whether the word that's the color of the word is printed in matches the word that it says. So here the word is printed in blue and also says blue, so it's a match. But we've also got some sort of short-term memory tests where you tap you remember colored blocks on the screen, that sort of a thing. And finally, we're constantly improving our experience. We're trying to improve our research program, so we collect feedback from our patients as well about their user experience, and we also collect some structured questions about how they found the whole experience as well, so that we can improve the process. So in the phase 1, so in this phase of the study that we're currently conducting, we're currently recruiting people living with Parkinson's disease, as well as their unaffected relatives and carers from the NHS clinics. So this is happening in the Rowling clinic, as well as in the Department of Clinical Neuroscience in Little France as well. And we're actively recruiting this at the moment. So if we're trying to get as many people to join on as possible. We're at about 81 people living with Parkinson's disease at the moment, so it'll be great to if we can recruit more. And what will happen is we will sit down in person, and we'll go through the study information, we'll go through the consent. That usually takes about 10-15 minutes. And then you'll be guided through the app and the speech recordings and the questionnaires and the games, so that we can help you and sort of troubleshoot any technical issues there and then as well. So a bit like the picture that's showing on there. That's me with Pam there, and yeah, that whole process will take about 20 to 30 minutes. So the whole thing takes about 25 to 40 minutes to complete. And as I said, that's what we're doing at the moment. But very shortly, we'll be starting a slightly more involved follow-up assessment. So rather than just seeing people at a single time point, we're hoping to bring them back to clinic every 6 months. In order to do these voice assessments, we'll also do a bit of additional what's called clinical assessments. So we might ask you some questions about your Parkinson's disease, how you're living with your illness. We also might examine you as well. And optionally, you can also provide a blood sample so that we can look at specific blood-based markers in the blood that looks at the damage to neurons. And we're hoping to pair this with the speech results that we have. And in between these assessments every 6 months, we'll also ask you to complete the app at home every 2 months as well. Just the app, nothing else. And so that will give us much more frequent information about the changes in your voice as well. And we're hoping to conduct that follow-up over the course of 1 year, but there's scope to extend that to 2 years if you're interested as well. And as I said, we're just waiting for approvals at the moment, but we're hoping to register interest from our patients who are interested in taking part in this slightly longer duration study. And so I mentioned already, we in our first phase of our study, we already have 81 people living with Parkinson's disease participating. We have 116 relatives and carers who are helping us in conjunction with that as well, which is incredibly helpful. And this phase 2, this follow-up study, is hopefully will be due to begin in the next few weeks. And we've already received some very positive feedback from our participants. Lots of them find it easy to use. They find it fun and engaging, slightly different from lots of the health research, which is oftentimes sat in the clinic, answering questions for hours on end. So this is something that's slightly different that might be interesting to yourselves. And so how may you contribute if you're interested? As I said, we're recruiting people living with Parkinson's disease, and any unaffected relatives and carers. They're very welcome to take part as well. Get in touch, register your interest, and we can arrange for you to come into clinic to start your first assessment. I pop our email address on there, and I'm happy to share that these slides around. You can have a look, or if you'd like, you can just pop into clinic and ask to have a look at the information, or speak to myself or one of the member of the research team. We're located just literally right next to the main entrance with the rotating doors in Little France. Or if you look to the right of the picture, which is just out of screen, that's where DCN is. So it's just across the road there. You're always very welcome just to pop in and just have a chat with us about getting in touch with research. There's other projects going on as well that you may be interested in. that's all I have for today. And thank you so much for your interest. And hopefully we'll hear from some of you today.
Thanks, Johnny. I'm going to stop the recording now.